In the 90s, Playmates Toys made the deepest line of Star Trek action figures in history. My name's Keith, and I'm a collector working towards owning all 284. I've been a Trek fan for almost 35 years, and most people are sick of me talking about it. But somehow I've convinced my old friend Mike to review them with me on Look at My Star Trek Toys! What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Look at My Star Trek Toys. We are here to talk about my Star Trek toys. My name's Keith Varney, and my co-host over there is the Unabomber, Mike Indeglio. How's it going, Mike?
It's going well. I placed headphones over my hoodie, which means that's the kind of day we're going to have.
Yeah. Original series Unabomber, like from the mugshot. But guess what? We're talking about the original series Star Trek. We are going all the way back to something's horrible. Oh, I thought you were telling me that something had gone wrong.
No,
that was the stop cue. But you were just fingering the Gorn. Okay. which is now everyone's favorite new euphemism.
Yeah, hashtag.
You're welcome, internet. But we are, I'm very excited this week because we're going to look at some unique and interesting toys made from the Star Trek original series way back in the 60s. And so the budget for a lot of these effects in 1967 were about the same budget as you spent at Walmart to buy these toys later in the 90s, but they made some really interesting figures. So are you pumped about it, Mike? Did you ever watch the original series?
I've watched some of the original series. In fact, I guess it's worth mentioning here that our boy Captain Kirk himself went to space for real last week.
He did indeed. William Shatner shattered himself all the way into orbit, which I feel was inevitable. I think this truly has been inevitable since the 60s at least. So congratulations, William Shatner. It's your turn now, Patrick Stewart.
Yeah.
The gauntlet has been thrown down.
I believe it. I think we'll see it.
Yeah, well, I certainly hope so. I mean, that would be super fun. All right. Well, speaking of super fun, I think because we have an action-packed, jam-packed episode this week, we should hop right in to our first figure. And we are going to go right to the rubber Goliath himself, figure 160441. Let's see the Gorn Captain. There he is, perhaps the most famous alien from the original series, other than the Klingons, but the most famous one-off alien. We have the Gorn Captain from, of course, the original series, Season 1, Episode 19, The Arena. Yeah, so before I give much more information, Mike, talk to me about this one.
Well, it's awesome. I will say that, as I've mentioned before, I would mix all of my figures together into what we called the Universal Wrestling Association or the Galactic Wrestling Federation. It changed promotions a few times. However, we actually had an old Commodore 64, and we would use our DOS knowledge to create posters for the events. And then we would actually run the pay-per-views. And then my brother actually, even when he got to college, he would charge people a pay-per-view, $5 to come to his dorm, get beer, and watch him do the events. It was pretty cool. We should have, nowadays we'd make a YouTube show, but.
With the action figures he did this?
Yeah, I mean, in real time.
Wow. All right. Yeah. Well, we have a new series we're definitely going to do. And of course, the giant overlap between professional wrestling and Star Trek fans, of which there is no overlap.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. The Gorn here is wearing a pro wrestling outfit.
A little singlet there. That is definitely true. So anyway, so this, and just for context, as we look at this rubber suit, this first aired on January 19th, 1967. And so there is the very famous slow fight with William Shatner. I want to point out the Gorn here in this episode is played by not one, not two, not three, but four different people.
Yeah, because they sweat their balls off.
I can only imagine. The head only was played by William Blackburn. The full body was Bobby Clark or Gary Combs, and the voice was Ted Cassidy. So they needed a lot of stunt people because it has one of the most famous long fight scenes here on the episode. And talk about the difference between the next gen and the original series, because it's kind of the same premise as Enemy Mine. The movie, no, that was not the. Anyway, you know what I mean. The Picard episode with Dathan, they're both two captains marooned on a planet. In original series, they fought, and in Next Generation, they talked and invented new languages. So the Gorn here, you thought, we're not going to see the Gorn again, because the Gorn, there was no Gorn agains in Next Gen Voyager or Deep Space Nine, but guess what? We did find the Gorn again on Enterprise. So I think we should take a look at the Gorn on Enterprise, which they made CGI. One of the early CGI characters on Star Trek. I'm not sure if it looks better or worse than the original rubber suit.
Well, there was something kind of magical about that practical effect, but not that magical.
Yeah, well, I mean, the practical effect, it wasn't, you know what it was? It was a early practical effects, which didn't look good, replaced by early CGI effects, which didn't look good.
Let's see.
But it was very, yeah, that's right. Mike, you make the determination. Talk to me about which is the better effect.
Well, oh man. I there's something about CGI. If it looks too CGI-y, like that looks like an outcast from a Ninja Turtles show on the bottom. And on the top, it kind of evokes the
regular Ninja Turtle.
The Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. It was sort of campy on purpose. Now, I don't know that they were going for campy on purpose, but it worked in the same vein. So let's go original, I think. Actually, to be honest, the action figure is better than both.
Well, yeah, all right. So let's talk about the action figure itself. It is both sort of cool and respectful of the original. It sort of is like, you can see the weird bug eye thing, so the stunt guy could see through it, and the rubber-ishness. But as an action figure, it looks more, I don't know, I buy it more because it's in the world of the action figure to be a little bit plastic.
Yeah, and I think it's not too scary, for the kids, but it's still got a ferocity to it and I like its the hand wrappings, the sort of, because he's got to punch and fight. It's cool. I really like it. He's even got like a Fred Flintstone sort of singlet. I'm loving it.
He does have Fred Flintstone. And you know what? We showed the box a little bit, but if you hop over to Toy Cam, I've got this one in the box, and we can look at the specifics of it. We can't see the Toy Cam. That's not what's going to happen.
What happened, Toy Cam?
I don't know. It's just I feel so dark and alone.
I guess we're not going to Toy Cam.
All right, no Toy Cam. Well, let's go back to the picture of the box.
Did Toy Cam die?
It looks like it's still going.
What happened, Toy Cam?
A peek behind the curtain. We're running Toy Cam off an old iPhone that's broadcasting live on OBS Studio, but apparently not.
When we checked it, it was working. So
it was working great. All right. Well, we'll next episode we're gonna have Toy Cam up and running. But we can talk a little bit about the box.
We almost got Toy. Yay!
Oh, hey, we did it. There we go. All right. So here is the original Gorn box, obviously with its Skybox Playmates collector card. And again, from the episode Arena. And he's kind of meager with his choking hazards. He's got that little stabber dealy, and I don't even want to talk about what I think the other thing is.
They're both a little phallic.
And on the side, we can see he's got a even larger phallic. It looks like a piece of wood with rope wrapped around it. So, yeah, all right. Well, it is what it is. Here is.
Look, it's primitive, and
the back.
Is their technology.
And the primitive cannon, a hollow timber used as a... Yeah, well, of course. Yeah, no, the cannon. But I think I think Kirk shot the cannon. Am I right? Am I wrong? Folks,
no, I'm
correct
saying
me.
We're saying a lot of things. Let's continue.
Yeah, we're just saying words at each other. So here is the back. We're just getting warmed up. It's our first episode of the day. We're doing a marathon of stuff. We don't know what we're doing. That's just what's going on. All right, so, and you can see here in the mixed series, we have a few more exciting monsters and such of guest stars from the original series coming.
Oh, we're going to look at that environmental suit? That looks cool.
We are eventually, but not yet. Because right now, what we're going to do...
What is happening? I'm not even recording the right thing. Oh my God.
What's happening? What's that? We thought we were going to be so slick that we've really figured this out, but we have profoundly not figured this out. But you know what I figured we ought to do? We ought to hop to the next figure in our series and take a look at a very famous classic. What is billed on the box as Vina as Orion Animal Woman, figure number 16040. Let's have her beam in.
Ooh.
Yeah, there is a lot going on with this whole deal here. Of course, on the original series back in 1967, she was a Orion slave girl, not Vina as Orion Animal Woman. I'm not sure how that's necessarily better. Why is she an animal woman?
Yeah.
But that's what we did when we did the mixed series box out in 97. So we first saw her in the unaired pilot of the original series, The Cage. So she was one of the very first alien species that we saw, period. And she was played by Susan Oliver. But this was not the last we would see as an Orion animal woman, is what they say on the box. Don't know why. And she would show up, or that species would show up again on Enterprise and in the J.J. Abrams Trek movie, continuing to be sexist depictions of basically sex slaves, sex trafficked Orion.
Now, some would say that you see Oliver.
Boo.
That's not bad. Come on, it's pretty good.
Well, you have to go back and remember Susan Oliver as the person. But yes, we do see Oliver. But she could finally, the Orion finally comes back as a non-sexist version on Lower Decks. Just recently, one of our main characters. So this is an interesting piece of Trek lore. So we see Vina on the box here, and this goes to the special anniversary edition. One of the details on the figure itself is the figure itself is not numbered, much like a lot of the dual packs or the collector's sets. The numbers are on the box. So the figure that I have not in a box isn't numbered, but I do have her in the box. And it's 31,055 I have here. And do I dare try to go to Toy Cam?
Let's see. Yeah,
no, we don't dare go to Toy Cam. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the box in the figure there. Generously not provided. I just flat out stole it from our friends at Wixaban to take a look at the box there. And you can see she comes with a fountain used in the Orion ritual dance, it says, as well as a torch which illuminates the Telosian caves. So, but those are the only choking hazards. I guess the fountain was enough. But I think we have a image. We have a couple of images here from the production of the cage, and you can see them applying the green makeup, the proto-alphaba, here in the cage. And there's Majel Barrett testing out the makeup effects. And of course, Majel Barrett would play Troy's mom and was Gene Roddenberry's wife, and a whole mess of other Star Trek characters. But there they are painting Susan Oliver with some thick green makeup paint. And you can see in the picture there, she's got sort of claw dealies, which did not make it on to the figure. But while we're doing it, why don't we hop forward in time and take a look at what they looked like on Enterprise? So there was a I would necessarily call it problematic episode of Star Trek Enterprise where they came on and wreaked havoc with the crew with pheromones and such. But that is not the only pop culture references to the Orion slave girls. In fact, I have one of my very own in a musical that I wrote called I Got Fired. I wrote a love song between two Star Trek fans entitled Green Painted Girl. And why don't we play a little clip? Hopefully.
When you're sitting right beside me, I find my breath is gone. I feel like Spock or Geordi facing off with a Klingon. My hands start getting clammy and my heart begins to run. 'Cause you shot me last night with the phaser set to stunning. Beam me up with your love. Beam me into your arms. You are the Troy to my Riker. Q to his smirk. You are the green painted girl to my Kirk.
I'm not listening to you.
That, of course, is Colin Lydon out in Korea when the premiere in I Got Fired. All right, so that's all we need to hear of that. If you would like to hear the entire song, it is available on the YouTubes. Just search for Green Painted Girl from I Got Fired. And you can see Colin Lydon and E.J. Zimmerman from the original cast perform that little ditty. All right. Now tell me, Mike, do you have any thoughts here on our Vina as Orion animal woman?
I think it's very cool, very classy, voluptuous, yes, but not indecent. I find it to be a very beautiful figure. I don't know that it would make it into the Wrestling Association, only because, Keith, it doesn't look particularly bendable into an athletic fighting pose.
No, in fact, you'll note that there's very little articulation.
Just the arms,
she can't
it looks like, right?
bend her elbows or her knees. Excuse me, I don't know why I'm choking and dying. But yeah, there's almost no articulation. This one is designed to sit on your shelf. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's an interesting figure. And certainly an important part of Trek lore. Yeah, we understand that from, especially back in the 60s, some of the elements were a little problematic. And luckily, we learned our lesson by 2021. Kind of. All right, well, let us move forward to another classic original series figure and character. Let us go to figure 65111, Captain Koloth. Here we are from Warp Factor Series 1. And it's from Warp Factor Series 1. This is also Series 1 of the Klingons. Before we reinvented the Klingons during the Star Trek the Motion Picture, the Klingons were just kind of orange.
Court jesters, kind of?
And had beards.
Sort of looks like Andrew Dice Clay meets the Bob's Big Boy guy. Full turnout. Like, what is that stance? What is happening?
Yeah, well, for the warp factor, they wanted to give him like wider stances, and it looks really weird. It looks like he's doing some sort of a jig. But this is from...
They ride a lot of horses.
Ride a lot of horses, yes. This is from the original series, The Trouble with Tribbles. Of course, a very famous episode that we get a lot of different figures from, and we did a couple of series back, began addressing some of the Deep Space Nine characters who did a crossover into that very episode. It's called Trials and Tribulations, one of the greatest episodes, not just of Deep Space Nine, but of Star Trek in general. And Captain Koloth here, our proto-Klingon, was played by William Campbell, who, Mike, I don't know if you remember, but he also played Trelane, who we saw the figure, also with an odd turnout.
I dug it, though.
With his big flowy coat and odd turnout. And here he is in the box. Now, if you remember, there is it came with the Trouble with Tribbles game, which we did a live opening on, which was a disaster because
didn't go well.
Those scratch-offs from the 90s don't work anymore. I don't know what horrible chemicals were involved in the making of that, but they no longer work as intended.
Ooh.
Now, in this picture here, would you believe that this same character, Captain Koloth, did an appearance many years later on Deep Space Nine as an old friend of Dax? But now he looks like a Klingon that we know from our classic era, from the 80s and 90s. But it was the same actor. It was still William Campbell. And in this episode, which was so cool, they had the 3 most prominent Klingon captains we met in the original series come back on Deep Space Nine as those same characters, but now in their regular Klingon-ness. And this is definitely one that I wish that we had a figure for, because he was a fun character. So
it's funny, you did over 100 wish lists, and I don't remember seeing it.
I think it was there. I actually think it was in there, but there was a lot of them, so we weren't necessarily counting them all. Yeah, I mean, and certainly they finally did address the differences in the Klingons' look. They made it a joke on Deep Space Nine, where Worf was like, "I just don't want to talk about it," when they noticed that the Klingons looked very different. But on Enterprise, they did have a storyline which did explain what happened, and I'm not going to spoil it. But I do feel that it was a pretty good explanation that I bought. So there is a canon reason why the Klingons are just humans until the motion picture. So any other thoughts here on our friend Captain Koloth?
No, it's cool. I love photography from the 60s, like just the kind of way it looks, but that's not really, has nothing to do with the figure. I dig it. It's okay. I get it for its classic nature and for the kind of history behind it, but as an action figure, it's a little dumpy. It's
also a little bit weird that they went to the trouble of building this whole figure and adding all the fancy pants and such, but they made his vest silver and not gold, like it is on the
also,
on the screen.
Is it me, or is are his legs like G.I. Joe skinny legs?
They're real skinny. Apparently William Campbell skipped leg day for this episode, because those are not the most thunderous thighs like you would get, say, from the Gorn figure. But nonetheless, an interesting piece of Trek history and a good figure to have on the shelf. And obviously they were doing a big promotion with the crossover on Trials and Tribulations. So they did a whole figure line with that, and you couldn't do that without the main antagonist from that episode. Well, I think we should move on to another classic original series episode, widely considered to be the best episode of the original series. And the main character from that, and that is figure 65114, Edith Keeler. Let's have her beam in. Here she is, and you're like, this doesn't look that crazy as an alien, right? Well, it's not an alien. It's a human. It's a human from the 30s, played by none other than Joan Collins from Warp Factor Series 3, and of course the episode City on the Edge of Forever, which was one of the early time travel episodes, which of course time travel is a mainstay, cornerstone, of Star Trek. And so in this episode, Kirk and Spock travel back in time and run into Edith Keeler, who was a leader, sort of a pacifist activist and leader. And they find out, spoiler alert, that they save her from being hit by a car, and that has terrible consequences to human history, and it all goes to hell. So it has a very tragic ending, but it's a really fascinating piece of sci-fi and a fascinating, it's a great episode. It is proto-quantum leap. Yeah, it really is. Whereas, as opposed to Archer having to go back and save something and make sure that something good happens, they kind of have to allow something bad to happen to save the future, which I think is interesting. And this is, of course, from Warp Factor Series 3. Mike, talk to me about Edith Keeler. Have you seen this episode?
I believe I've seen it in sort of retrospects, that you see clip shows and stuff of like the best shows or best episodes from certain time periods, I believe, because I remember Joan Collins. But I don't know that I've seen the episode in its full. I might check it out after this episode, actually. I'm interested. I like the figure as well. I wish, I've said this often, I get the 30s nature. I wish the hat was a little more kind of bedazzled or textured. And I wish you could take the cloak off. Because I think even if it stayed in this sort of like rubberized plastic kind of material, it'd be cool if you could take it off and she had some sort of something going on underneath. Just for layer's sake, but if Toy Cam is working, which is probably not a good chance. Oh, you know what? It's definitely not because the phone died. We're going to address that between episodes. But it is a hard plastic cloak, and so there's definitely nothing underneath. In fact, you can see her legs sort of sticking out of the bottom. It's just one piece with legs sticking out. But that said, the molding I think is really good. It looks like Joan Collins. Yeah, it's a good likeness for sure.
And no, I mean, I think it's an interesting figure, and it's also just it's one of those ones that you sort of have to have because it really is an iconic episode of Trek and an iconic character. And I will also say, there are figures of Kirk and Spock from this episode in 1930s clothes, but we're going to get to them later because this episode is about guest stars, and they weren't guest stars. So we will definitely get to that. In fact, one of them is was one of the exclusives you can't get in stores. So we will talk about that when we get there. But thank you for dropping in, Edith. I think it is time to go to our finale figure of this episode. And let us talk about figure number 65120, the Andorian. Woo!
Yes.
Mike, just hit me with your feelings immediately.
I'm looking at Jesse the Body Ventura.
Apparently this episode's about wrestling.
Yeah. Super cool. Here's what I'm getting. I'm getting all of the texture I'm asking for. I'm getting a detachable entrance gown, boa situation, the weirdest like He-Man head. That's definitely Adam's head from He-Man, the He-Man figure line, and like these antennae. I mean, everything about this is speaking to me.
There is so much going on here with the Andorian. Okay, let us just begin.
And his muscular rear end is in prominent display. This is quite that. I can't imagine that actor has muscles like that. But you know what, Keith, enlighten me.
Yeah, I don't know what to feel about this whole thing. It's causing latent feelings I wasn't expecting. So this is from Warp Factor Series 4, which you can tell because of their weird turnouts and their lack of articulation, but wildly spread legs and arms. This is from the original series episode, Whom Gods Destroy. So the Andorian species come from a cold planet, and that is why he is wearing his feather boa sort of a deal here, which in the episode itself is very clearly red, and in the figure is very clearly pink. Not quite sure why they changed the color. Maybe that was a color correction thing. I don't know. But they probably
Maybe they
just
had
a lot
left over from another line or another figure that they were like, let's cut those losses.
We had some leftover pink fabric for this figure. And they have their little antennas, which move independently once they had the budget to do that, which they didn't at this point. But this version of the Andorian was played by Dick Geary. The Andorians also, interestingly, are some of the founding members of the Federation. So they're actually a very important species with the Vulcans and such, and played a much bigger role, not in the original series, but on Enterprise later on. And of course, the most famous Andorian was Shran on Enterprise, played by legendary Star Trek actor Jeffrey Combs. I think we have a picture of Jeffrey Combs and Shran in there somewhere. There he is, who was going to be, according to the rumors and innuendo, if Enterprise had been renewed for a 5th season, he would have joined the cast as a main character, because that character had become so interesting. It was sort of started as like he was an enemy, then a frenemy, then a friend, and then I think he was actually going to join the cast and be on the ship, which would have been awesome. The canceling of Enterprise is such a bummer, because that show got really good by the end of its run, but by that point people had sort of written it off with Star Trek fatigue, and it didn't have a great first couple of seasons, and it was a bummer because my family lost their jobs on that one too. So you'll see in the package there, and we actually have an episode where we unbox this very figure. He has a torture chair, so the chair that comes with him from the episode. Basically, Kirk and Spock, they beam down to this prison planet, and we're criminally insane, and they escape, and chaos ensues, but they have this torture chair that we get Kirk tortured on. But also, in that episode is speaking of William Shatner going to space. I think he might have gone to space in this clip from the show where, to be fair, he was playing someone who was pretending to be Kirk. So it wasn't technically William Shatner playing Kirk. It was William Shatner playing a crazy person playing Kirk. But this is one of the most glorious freakouts you'll ever see. I mean, Shatnering so hard, it's unbelievable.
But what I love about clips like this, and my favorite thing to do is watch shows and watch background actors. Watch the response of the actors after he shoves them. They don't go flying. He just kind of pretends to stumble, and then that other guy just in the background, just standing there.
I got to see this. I was supposed to fall to the ground, but I got to see this, man. I'm gonna stay up.
Hysterical.
So, I mean, some of the glory of the original series is to see stuff like that. And, I think that these figures that they made from the original series, you have sort of a nostalgia factor with the original series where, look, it wasn't about, the effects weren't great. It was very low budget, and it was much more about the creativity of the writing. And so, the alien creatures, like we saw with the Klingons, there's not much going on there. And, the Andorians' little antennas there, it's a little goofy. But I think there's the sort of nostalgia factor of enjoying how, I don't know, silly they were a little bit, the Gorn in particular, that it's nice to see that represented in the figures. Although I think what Playmates did is they sort of split the difference a little bit, because with the Andorian specifically, they sort of like cooled it up just a bit with, the texturing on his tunic there and the stripe in his pants. I don't know if that happened, and him being like super jacked. None of that was really there in the original series. So they had to make some interesting choices on how do we reflect the nostalgic, low-budget original series-ness in these figures while also trying to action figure them up a little bit. And I think a lot of the criticism of the later Warp Factor series is that they tried to action figure them up a little bit too much. And so Mike, as a non-Star Trek fan, what do you think about the action figurine-ness of it all?
It's hard to know in the timeline of things. Like, I can understand if they were, if they're looking at market research and it's showing them that like this line of figures, the He-Man line of figures or whatever it may be at the time, is selling better. We have to go in that direction. I get it. What I find interesting is that they have such a quote unquote pop with the the figure itself, like the pop of color, they really went for it on the textured costume piece. But in the boxing, as you can see, it sort of like overtakes his face.
It rides up a little bit. Yeah.
Also, I find it interesting. I think we've talked about it. I can't tell. Is this on? Is the green cardstock part of the box, or is the box actually triangular on the left side there?
The box is triangular. The warp factor boxes have that weird triangle cut.
That is
It
cool.
is cool.
But then his sort of like his, I guess, starship type of situation that he ships with there.
Well, that's his torture chair.
Oh, okay, great. That it's sort of bland too. It's an interesting collection of. The boxing is interesting to me, is I guess what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem to reflect the character I saw on screen. It's interesting in many ways.
Well, it is weird that he does have like that, like the weird muff around his neck, because if you go back to the picture of the screenshot of the character, it's not quite so in his face. It's very aggressive. The poofiness is very aggressive on the figure, and so there wasn't a need for it to be quite so aggressive there. But yeah,
I'm looking at it. Let's see. Yeah. Well, you be the judge.
Well, that's the wrong picture. Go back to the original series. No, go back to the original one.
Oh, I got what you're saying. Not the box at all.
Yeah, there you go. So you can see his sort of feather boa is not. It's not climbing his face quite as much as the figures, but look, you're mass producing these things very cheap. Obviously, a human hand had to stitch him into this thing, which was probably just a tremendous amount of work to do that. Which I don't know quite why they did it.
Telling you, what this is giving me. It's giving me vibes of, and Maybe I'm reaching, but you be the judge here. Let me see if I can pull it into the frame. We're doing it live, folks.
Oh, no.
This is how we do.
Oh, yes.
See what I'm saying?
It's the same color. He's got the same haircut.
Yeah, it's very reminiscent.
Well, and to be fair, He-Man is reminiscent of this because this came out 20 years before He-Man.
But that's a good point.
Yeah. Well, folks, that has been the Star Trek Original Series Guest Stars Part 1. Mike, what do you think about the whole line? Are you pumped? Are you ready for Part 2?
I am ready for Part 2. I'll say this, though we were a little bit critical, and I do apologize. Today was not our best technical episode of the show.
No, it was not.
We're doing it live, and I'm trying to experience real time with you and do the show. So sometimes I get a little screwed. But I'll say this, Keith. You know that I don't want to say complain, but I feel a little fatigue from just this in uniform shots. Mm-hmm. Especially since some of the later uniform shots, they got away from the sort of action posiness. So there's a sameness, I feel, at times, not being the hugest Trek guy. But these, you can see how in the beginning, there was just sort of an onslaught of creativity. Maybe the execution was in development, let's say, but the creativity's there, and I enjoy that sort of overt creativity, and I'm excited to see what else is in store for us.
Okay, well, if people would like to complain about our tech or our creativity, how would they do it, Mike?
Well, it's very easy. Send Keith an email at lookatmystartrektoys@gmail.com. He checks that and sends me the good uns. Say hey to Keith. Don't just ask to buy his action figures. When I do read the action, I do see a lot of solicitation, Keith. Now you're like a wholesaler now.
No, which I'm excited to do. I'm just so lazy. I have to figure out how to do it, but I promise I'm going to. I promised my wife I'd sell the extras. I can't just keep them in a box in the basement.
I also enjoy everyone's the pictures you've been sending us about your setups, your displays, your customs. Everything's so cool. We're not hoarding it for ourselves. We are gonna do an episode at some point coming up. Don't you worry. We just have to figure out how we want to do it. You can also check us out on Instagram at Star Trek Toys. Yeah, that's us. Give us a tag, give us a like, give us a follow. And that's, I think, all the ways you can contact us currently. Hey, if you're just really into us, we got another show currently. We've got some other things in the fire as well. Irons in the fire. We talk about the practice. Check us out on the KME channel. It's a podcast about two men going slowly insane.
Yes, indeed. So like and subscribe to that. And we will see you back next week with another episode of... Look at my Star Trek toys!